Thank you. Thank you, Wade, and thank you for all of your good work on civil rights over the years, and the Vera Institute for all the good work that you've done. I've been an elected official for over 30 years in the Virginia State Legislature and in Congress, and one of the things I've noticed is that when it comes to crime policy, you really have a choice. You can reduce crime, you know how to do that, or you can play politics, and we know how to do that. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of common ground right now because the politics of crime is a slogan-based mandatory minimums, life without parole, 3 strikes and you're out. If you can get it to rhyme, it's even better. If you do the adult crime, you do the adult time. That runs about 80% in the polls. Only problem is that it increases crime rather than decreases crime. All of those slogans and sound bites have got us to the point now where we lock up a higher portion of our population than any country on earth by far. Most countries lock up about 50 to 200 per 100,000. Russia's the only thing close at about 500 and some per 100,000. We're over 700 and some per 100,000 locked up today. And to put that into perspective, the Pew Research Center has done some studies. Anything over 350, you're starting getting diminishing returns from locking people up. Anything over 500, counterproductive. You're messing up so many families, wasting so much money that you're actually adding to crime rather than reducing crime above 500. And we're at over 700 per 100,000. So bad the Children's Defense Fund calls it the cradle to prison pipeline. We need to add some common sense because we know what to do. If you have a comprehensive, evidence-based approach to reducing crime, getting young people on the right track, keeping them on the right track, starting early with teen pregnancy prevention so fewer babies are born into dysfunctional families, prenatal care can reduce learning disabilities and mental retardation, nurse visits. The nurse-family partnership has been shown to significantly reduce child abuse, which is highly correlated with future crime, early childhood education, make sure children can read by the 3rd grade. The teachers tell us up to the 3rd grade, you learn to read. After the 3rd grade, you read to learn. If you can't read after the 3rd grade, you're not learning. You're on the way to dropping out. And dropping out puts you on a trajectory that includes as much prison as anything else. An evidence-based approach to get young people on the right track and keep them on the right track. We know that will reduce crime. And so we're up here doing all these slogans and sound bites, and thank God for groups like the Vera Institute that put some facts, some evidence, and some research on the table. We had a tremendous report on resource officers. Very popular, particularly after the shooting in Newtown. Let's have a police officer all over the place. And the Vera Institute did some research and found that the likelihood that the resource officer would be, these shootings are over in a minute, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, they're done. The chance that the resource officer is going to be at the spot where the shooting occurs is so unlikely. And the resource officer, they have found, doesn't protect the children. They go around arresting the children, getting them caught up in the criminal justice system with all the dysfunction that entails. That they found that the discussion of resource officers is a question of whether it's a total waste of money or whether it's counterproductive. To my knowledge, it's the only study we've seen. And as a direct result of that information, the support for resource officers plummeted. And all of the, in the House, when we came up with recommendations, we came up with support in the schools that did not include police officers in the schools. That's because of the research done by the Vera Institute. So we need to look at things that actually work, and a comprehensive evidence-based approach, getting young people on the right track, keeping them on the right track, which is embodied in the Youth Promise Act that I've introduced, is the kind of thing that will actually reduce crime and save a lot of money in the process. We're also looking at the research that you've done showing the mandatory minimums and how dysfunctional they are. They've been studied. RAND had a study entitled mandatory minimums, throwing away the jailhouse key or the taxpayers' money. And they concluded that it was just a waste of money. It requires sentences that are unrelated to the seriousness of the crime, totally disrupts the matrix and common sense in sentencing, often requires judges to impose sentences that violate common sense, just adds to the over-incarceration. These kinds of, and now we have, as a direct result of those studies, the bipartisan legislation that the Attorney General mentioned, where we have a compromise bill that has gotten out of the Senate committee. Unfortunately, by the time they finished the amendment process, they were maybe adding more mandatory minimums than they're subtracting, but at least they're discussing mandatory minimums in a way, and hopefully we can get it back on track where it's actually reducing and not adding. But there's bipartisan legislation in the House and the Senate, and legislation, more extensive legislation that will go right at mandatory minimums themselves, giving the judges an opportunity when a mandatory minimum is in fact unjust, gives the judge an opportunity to sentence in a way that makes common sense. And so I want to thank Wade the opportunity to be here today. Thank you for your work in the Leadership Conference and Civil Rights over the years, and the Vera Institute for helping us make crime policy in a way that is consistent with evidence and research. So thank you very much for all that you do.